Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Red Mountain High School and our speaker presentation today. My name is Annalise Markin, and I'm the liaison for Red Mountain, Fremont, and Fort McDowell for the Native American Education Program. Thanks for joining us today. We are taking a time out today just to recover a little bit and relax. These are tough times, but there is hope, and we can support each other through the WebEx and Zoom. We can always have meetings this way. The modern technology is wonderful, and Dr. Molina will join us on the Zoom and speak with us today. Now, I wanted to introduce Jerzy Wasilewski. He's a counselor here at Red Mountain High School, and he was just talking to our students. If you would just please say a few words.
Okay, guys, I just wanted to kind of remind you guys, really, Dr. Molina had, in my opinion, summed it up in a comment he'd made earlier as we were chatting about the meeting in terms of just maintain those human connections. Make sure that in whatever way that you can, you're not getting disconnected from your own support group. You know, we were talking here in the group about the experience with school in terms of how it was going when we were remote, and then how that felt differently when we came back to campus. And you know, motivation is hard when you end up isolating yourself, not necessarily intentionally, just it happens naturally as there's less engagement with others during the day, and you kind of get more comfortable just sitting at home, snacking, not getting out of bed, not having to get up in the morning with as much urgency or purpose as you did when you were on campus. And now some of us are on campus, and some of us, for individual health decisions, are staying home. You know, just to remind everybody that we respect whatever decision you're making, but if you are able to be present and, of course, continue with the mask mandates, we want you to be where you're getting the most support. And I know that there's a lot more opportunity here on campus. And just some of the kids were, sorry, got an announcement.
For homecoming royalty today during your fourth and fifth hour class. The blue ballot was placed in your box, and please make sure you sign the ballot. You can send the ballot to Ms. Timonis in room 142 or place it in her mailbox today. Also, graduating seniors and early junior graduates, we have posted your names as they will appear on your diploma in the Commons window. Please check the spelling of your names. See Diane Ripley in the administration office as soon as possible if you have a correction. This list will be taken down in December.
So we just want to make sure that everybody's getting the support that they need, and that support can come from a lot of different places. You know, at home, make sure that you're talking to each other. If you are attending remotely and feel disconnected from your friends, make sure you're staying engaged with them. You know, just don't let the lack of routine that you used to have get you. We want to make sure that we don't get completely out of the groove with school in the way that we perceived it traditionally, and just make sure to keep up your social network. We could get into a long conversation about the dangers of social media, but the whole point is just make sure that you're reaching out and keep in contact. Some of the students here were just sharing what a difference it makes to just get up and out of the house a little bit. Stay active as much as you can, and just make sure that you're developing a new routine for yourself based on our current realities. So.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wasilewski. And we'll have Logan now introduce the topic.
Okay. Hi, my name is Logan King, and I am the club president for the Native American Club in Red Mountain High School. And we would like to welcome everybody that come today, and I thank you guys for coming and to listen to his powerful speech today from Dr. Molina. And he's going to talk about sanity through tradition, and it's been a stressful year this year, and a lot because online and COVID has really changed a lot of things in our lives. But now, since now we come and kick back and just listen to Dr. Molina and reach into your own resource of your well-being. And Janae would like to talk about Dr. Molina.
So hi, I'm Janae Begay, the secretary for Red Mountain Native American Club, and I'd just like to introduce Dr. Molina and some of his accomplishments. Dr. Molina is the founder of Las Fuertes Clinic in Guadalupe, Arizona. He is a graduate of the University of Arizona College of Medics. Sorry. Okay, so sorry, that was our bell music. Anyways, Dr. Molina is a graduate of University of Arizona College of Medicine and Arizona State University and the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law. He was featured on Channel 12 TV and has written extensively in medical journals on the importance of diversity, the art of medicine, and patient care. He has presented a state and national conference on the importance of integrating culture into the medicine system and improving doctor-patient communications to reduce malpractice risk. He is the recipient of the Healthcare Heroes Physicians Achievement Award, the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Humanitarian Award, the Special Recognition Award from the Office of Governor Napolitano, the Patricia Locke Memorial Scholarship Award, United States Public Health Service, and the Humanitarian of the Year Award in Washington, D.C. Just to introduce Dr. Molina and his accomplishments.
Well, thank you for that very humbling and introduction about who I am. And I really appreciate it for the time that you all have come together to hear me share my story. You know, again, in my language, Dios en Chamiabo, which is our Yaqui greeting, that the Creator be with you. Epo John Molina Teak, that says, my name is John Molina. Amana Devota Viejit Newi, which means that I extend my blessings and well-being to all of you. And again, I am a Pascua Yaqui, and actually Yavapai-Apache. My father is a full-blood Yaqui Indian who was born here in the community of Guadalupe, just south of Tempe, and continues to live here. My mother was born in San Carlos. She's from San Carlos Apache, but she's actually Yavapai from the Fort McDowell area. And this has to do with the fact that during the military period of the Indian Wars and the wars with Geronimo, that many of the Yavapai Indians and Apache Indians were rounded up and placed on a military fort in San Carlos. After the wars, they were allowed to go back home, and the Yavapai people went back to Fort McDowell, to Camp Verde, to their homelands, but some of the Yavapais chose to stay in San Carlos. And my mother's ancestors are those that chose to stay in San Carlos. So that's my background. And I actually was born here in Phoenix, and I was raised in the community of Guadalupe. And that's where my story begins. Raised in the community of Guadalupe, there was actually a tricultural community. Within the community of Guadalupe, it was mostly Yaqui Indian, settled in the 19th. It was also a mix of other indigenous people, Salt River Pima, Tohono O'odham, and of course my mother lived here also. And of course, these mixture of cultures in this small community is very diverse. The thing that happened with me, and I share this story to kind of lead up to where we're at now in this current days, we can continue to be strong as indigenous people, is that my mother had the boarding school experience, which many of you have read about, have learned about, to where many of her children were sent to boarding schools across the country forcibly by the government as a way as to assimilate our ancestors into the white way of life, into the Western way of life, forcing our children at that time to not speak their language, not do their ceremonies, and cut their hair, wear uniforms as a way to assimilate us. And what happened is that this was really traumatic to a lot of our, to all of our kids back at that time, to cause them to force them into a new way of life. And that's what happened to my mother. She attended the Phoenix Indian boarding school here in Phoenix when she was just a young girl, about 7 or 8 years old. My father tribe, the Yaqui Indians, are actually a tribe from Sonora, Mexico. And during the Mexican Revolutionary War, the government tried to take over a lot of Yaqui land in Mexico. A lot of wars were done during that time, during the 18th century. And a lot of the Yaquis did fight against the Mexican government, but in many cases were defeated. And because of loss of family and life of the Yaqui people in Mexico, many Yaqui families moved up into the Arizona territory during the 18th century and the early 19th century. As a result, the Yaqui Indians began to populate the southern areas of Arizona, Tucson and Marana, Casa Grande, and eventually Guadalupe in 1910. So that's how the Yaqui Indians ended up here in Arizona. And the Yaqui Indians subsequently recognized as a federally recognized tribe in 1978. So they're one of the over 570 tribes that are fully recognized, as well as my mother, obviously, San Carlos Apache. So that's where my mom met my dad, here in Guadalupe. And I'm the firstborn of seven children. Growing up in Guadalupe was a challenge, because one of the things that happened to me, that happened to a lot of our young people who grew up in the urban areas, to our culture, our ceremonies, our language. In fact, my mother, having left the San Carlos Apache Reservation, eventually forgot her language, her ceremonies. My dad, being Yaqui Indian, escaping his family, escaping from Mexico, lost touch with his culture and his ceremonies. So when I grew up in Guadalupe, I had no connection to my culture of Yaqui Indian or San Carlos Apache. And I tried to do as much as I could for the world around me. Growing up in Guadalupe, Mexican families, the Yaqui families, but mostly, for the most part, attending a lot of the white schools in the area of Tempe. I attended the elementary school here in Tempe, which was a white middle-class school, elementary school called Gilliland. And then later went on to attend McClintock High School, which is a high school here in Tempe. So my early life was really sort of forged along the ways of trying to assimilate into this Western world. And what I found that was difficult for me is that there was something inside of me that kind of didn't fit right. You know, there was something about me that I knew could not really fit into this world, in as much as I tried, you know, going to school, doing the things I was supposed to. And yet I felt unsettled in who I was as an individual. So I tried everything in my life to accommodate to what the Western world expected me to do, to go to school and to college and be successful. In fact, my mother wanted me to be successful. She wanted me to be able to have an education, have a good job, have a nice house, a car, and raise a family, just like everybody else was doing here in the Phoenix area. That was my impression of where I was going. But, you know, in my early life, I really felt unsettled, even though I tried and did my best to do what my parents wanted me to do was to go to school. And unfortunately, in my early age and teenage years, I got involved in drugs and alcohol. And as part of, I think, my way of trying to find myself, I was unsettled in my spirit. And I just continued to go down that path. Well, by my late, after high school, I kind of realized that being around Guadalupe was not good for me because I was getting involved a lot in drugs and alcohol with my friends. Many of my friends were dying of heroin overdoses or ended up in jail. And I knew for some reason that wasn't what was right for me. And this came to me one evening as I was considering myself and wondering, where do I go from here? You know, where is my life going? And at the time, I was probably only about maybe 17 years old. And I think this is something that a lot of our young people think about at, at that age in life who are growing up in urban areas. Is where is my life going? You know, what's happening and what's my purpose in life? And this is what I struggle with, you know. And unfortunately, what happens to a lot of our young kids is that when they begin to question themselves in this way, it puts them at high risk to do things they shouldn't do that hurt themselves. They struggle with drugs and alcohol, and a lot of times it gets to the point where it's no longer controllable, and it produces a lot of anxiety and depression and anger. And that's why I think we find a lot of high suicide rates among our young people. Young people as young as 12 years old and up through the teenage years who commit suicide because they're trying to find themselves at who they are. Well, I realized at that time through an awakening that I had here in Guadalupe that I had a purpose in life. That for some reason that was unknown to me, that the Creator brought me in this world for a purpose. And I think that's the one thing that I share with all the young people that I speak to, is that never forget that the reason that you're here is for a purpose, that the Creator brought you for a purpose and a reason to be able to breathe the air and to live this world and to be able to mix with other people, your people. So not knowing what my purpose was, I knew that I had to leave Guadalupe, so I joined the Navy in sort of desperation to get away from everything that I knew was bad for me. And while in the Navy, I experienced a new way of life, a new world out there, and I knew that there was more of a purpose of what I needed to do in my life. I got interested in religion and psychology. And after the Navy, I came back. I went to college because I wanted to come back and help my people. I think a lot of our young people who go through this sort of a kind of an event in their lives when they're seeking to find who they are, I think there's also something in us that tells us we want to go back and help our people because we know and you experience what goes on with our people, all the illnesses, the diseases, and things that our people experience. We see our elders struggling, our young people struggling. And I think each of you at one point in your life inside of you tells you, go back and help your people. You know, do the best you can to keep your people healthy and well. So what I did early on was I decided to go into counseling, and I went back to Guadalupe to help my people, my community, because I knew a lot of my friends and even now their children were struggling with drugs and alcohol. And I wanted to make a difference in their life. I even wanted to help the elderly people because I knew they needed food, they needed clothes, and they needed things to be able to help them. So when I would go out as a counselor into Guadalupe, I was kind of like a counselor, social worker. I got to meet a lot of my family and work with them, and it felt good. It felt good to be in the community, to helping them. And for me, that was one of the greatest experiences, and I think that greatest experiences you will have, if you ever go back to your community to help, you're going to feel this sense of accomplishment and feeling that you're helping your people. A very, very strong feeling that makes you feel good about your people and of yourself. Well, while I was in Guadalupe, working with people, I came across a lot of diseases, you know, people with bad infections and diabetes and high blood pressure among my people. We're not a big community. We're only 5,000 people in 1 square mile. But in that time that I worked with our people, I saw a lot of our people suffering. You know, they wouldn't go see the doctor and they wouldn't go to the clinic. They didn't want to go to the hospital because a lot of people thought, you know, the hospital is where you go to die, you know, want to go to hospitals. And even right now, our people that I've learned through our meeting with the San Carlos Apache hospital this morning is even right now, a lot of people are scared to go to the hospital because they're afraid they're going to get COVID. So our people have a lot of feelings about this Western medical care that, you know, they're going to get sicker or might die if they go to the hospital. So this really made me feel very sad for my people that they were basically at home dying, trying to take care of themselves with their herbs and their teas and their ointments that they would make at home out of plants. And that's what they thought, that this would be healing. So when I asked people in my community why they didn't go see doctors, it was because either one, they didn't have insurance, two, they didn't have money, three, they didn't speak English very well, or four, they just didn't trust white doctors, didn't trust white hospitals. They would rather take care of themselves. And if they died, they died. Even one man told me one time with diabetes, he said, if I'm to die, then I'm supposed to die. And that made me feel bad. I felt that what the community needed was a clinic in Guadalupe with a doctor that could take care of them, a doctor that understood their language, that spoke their language, that knew their culture, that knew their hurts, their pains, their sorrow. This is a kind of doctor that I felt needed to be in Guadalupe. I shared this with a friend of mine who was a psychiatrist, Dr. Lincoln Westman. I told Dr. Westman, I really feel bad about my people. At the time I was in my early 30s, and I said, Dr. Westman, my people are suffering. They need a doctor. They need a clinic. They need somewhere they can go to. They'll be understood and be taken care of the way they want to be taken care of. They need a doctor. And then Dr. Westman told me then, he says, well, John, why don't you become that doctor? Why don't you go back and help your people as a doctor, as a physician? And I'd never thought of that. Because for me, growing up in Guadalupe, being poor, working in the farm fields, and my family was poor, my mom and dad never went to high school, I never thought about being a doctor. Never in my mind. In fact, when I was in high school, I barely passed. I wasn't that serious at school. And even when I tried science classes, I wasn't that good at science. And I thought that doctors were mostly white people, white men and women who came from well-to-do families, from educated parents who went to college. These were what I thought in my mind were doctors, not somebody from Guadalupe or somebody from some reservation. I asked Dr. Westman, I said, Dr. Westman, what makes you think I can become a doctor? And I never told him about my science classes. I never told him about my GPA or where I went to college, where I went to school, all my academics, none of that. What he told me was, he said, John, you can be a doctor because you have the spirit of healing. You have the spirit of healing. That's what he told me. Again, he didn't ask me about my GPA or how I did in high school or in college. What he saw in me was a compassion for my people, what he called the spirit of healing. He also said the spirit of healing because you've experienced the sorrows of your people. You've been there. He knew about my drug abuse and things that I went through. He said, because you've been through all this and you care about your people, you have that spirit of healing. That's why you should be the doctor. So that really touched me in a different way to think about that. Is that all it takes, a spirit of healing, to be a doctor, to be a healthcare professional? Well, apparently it was, because what he believed. And later I was to learn that after I went to medical school. I didn't know how to get to medical school. I don't even know where to start. Who teaches our kids, our indigenous kids, about how to get to medical school? Back in the 1970s, this was. Well, I didn't know, so I went to the library and I began to research how to go to medical school. And I realized it was a long, difficult path. College and pre-med classes and taking the medical college admission tests and doing applications and getting letters of support. It was a long process. And even then, you weren't guaranteed you were going to get to medical school. In fact, back then, over 600 applicants applied to the University of Arizona College of Medicine, and they only accepted 100. So only 1 out of 6 people would get into medical school. So I felt, gee, I don't know if I can do that. It seems so long. And then after medical school, it's 3 to 4 years of residency to get your certification as a specialist. It's a long time. So I went back to Dr. Westman. I said, I guess that's an option. I go, but do you know how long it takes to get to medical school? The things that you got to do? I says, yeah. And I said, Dr. Westman, I'm going to be 40 years old by the time I become a real doctor. And he says, well, John, you're going to be 40 years old whether you're a doctor or not. He really encouraged me. He supported me. He says, you need to go back to your community. So I did. I changed and took extra 2 years of extra college courses to do my pre-med. I did everything I was supposed to do. And again, I think that was supposed to be my journey because I did get into medical school. But I went to medical school for the purpose of coming back to my community to open up the clinic, the clinic that you heard about, Las Fuentes Health Clinic in Guadalupe. And for me, that was a great lesson in my life to come back to my community as a physician, as a doctor. And I think a lot of you, maybe at this point in your time in school, maybe you've been thinking about things like this already. You know, how you want to come back, and because you know you've been given the greatest gift that anybody can have, among other gifts, the gift of education, of being able to sit in a classroom, go to class and learn liberal arts, learn sciences, learn literature, learn English, because you know that's going to make you a stronger person in knowledge and skills and understanding. You combine that with your spirit as an indigenous person, you're going to be very powerful to go back to your community and help in any ways. You know, when I was in medical school, I got a chance to work with a healer. In Yaqui, we call him Ketebi, which is a Yaqui healer. And one of the things I remember he told me, and I spent a lot of time with him, he said, you know, a good doctor, you know, is not afraid of anything. He gives us medicine and he gives us life. But what he meant to say, as I got to learn later, was everybody, your medicine, my medicine might be healthcare, but what he thought was your medicine is anything you give to somebody to make them feel better. Your medicine could be your words. Your medicine could be your healing touch. Your medicine could be your prayer. Your medicine could be your profession as a social worker, as a counselor, as a doctor, as a nurse, as a medical assistant. That's your medicine. That's a medicine that's going to help your people. So his words are powerful because you give your medicine, he said, and you give your life. So as indigenous people who go back to our communities to help our people, it's a lifelong journey to give back to our people in the best way you can. Now, each of you has a different gift. Each of you has a different gift of mind, of heart, of spirit. You know, throughout the 30 years that I've been in medicine, and I work with a lot of indigenous kids and youth, each one of them has a different interest. You know, some want to go into the medical field to be a doctor, or maybe a dentist, or maybe a nurse, or maybe something like that, but that's your gift. Even your gift could be a gift of teaching, to go back and teach the young kids. Because a lot of time, the things that you've went through, those difficult times in your life, either with your family or your parents, but you've experienced as part of your journey to grow. Like I look back now at my journey, and everything that I went through was part of my growth, to learn, to be able to feel that hurt of my people. Because the best way that you can ever help and heal your people is that you yourself have experienced, and you've been through it, and you've been resilient. So I was very fortunate, you know, and I opened up a clinic in Las Fuentes, and it was a wonderful experience back in the 1990s. And I started taking care of the elders that I remember seeing when I was just a student counselor, and made me feel people, to be there for them, to take care of them, of their cuts, their infections, their hurts, their pains, to be able to do my minor surgeries. I saw a lot of my friends who were heroin addicts who came to my clinic because they trusted us, because they believed in us. You see, the one thing that we have that this white world can't give is that how we relate to each other as Indian people, as one Indian person to another. We feel comfortable. We feel we can trust each other. And that's how I felt, that the people who came to me, or even drug addicts, they trusted us. They trusted us because we would respect them. Where they were alcoholics, or whether they were drug addicts, or whatever they were, we never judged them. And that's part of who we are as people. We don't judge each other because we're family, because we're related, because we're indigenous. So my time at Las Fuentes was a beautiful experience of taking care of our people. I even delivered babies. We provided prenatal care, and I delivered our infants in different hospitals. I would go also. I actually had a couple little medical bags that were donate it to me, and I would go visit them at home. A lot of elders who couldn't go to the hospital, to a clinic, I would go drive to their homes, and I would take care of them, and I would take care of their wounds and talk to them. But the greatest thing about being any kind of healer, whether you're a doctor, a nurse, or a counselor, I think the greatest healing thing you can do is to connect to that person, hear their stories, to validate them, to show their respect and concern for them. That's very healing. That in itself is very healing, even more than medicine or surgery, to listen and to hear the concerns of our people. Other thing that happened too is that we had a lot of our elders who were dying of cancer. And they were at home, at hospice, on their last days. And I would still go see them, even though I couldn't do anything more because their cancer had spread and no more radiation treatment or no more chemotherapy to be done. They were just waiting to die. Most doctors would say, well, it was nice knowing you. Stay comfortable. Give them pain medication so they don't feel the pain of cancer. But for me, it was different. It was to go see them at least once or twice a week to see how they're doing, even though they're dying. To just be at their bedside, to talk with them, to share stories, to hear their stories. That's part of being a healer. The greatest healers, I think, in our indigenous communities are those that listen. You can be that kind of healer. In whatever profession you go in, whether it's a teacher, a counselor, health professions, anything you do in your community, listen to our people. That's how we hear each other. And that's how it's always been. We share stories, we listen, we learn. That's what makes us very powerful. Well, after a few years at Las Fuentes and taking care of people, that's when I got interested in law school. Because most of my patients were very poor, not covered by insurance and not able to get medical care. So I got interested in healthcare law and policy because I wanted to find ways to understand the law, to be able to expand health benefits for our people, to be able to expand the healthcare that they need. Because a lot of what we're given in healthcare benefits, even in Indian Health Service, the benefits you get through Indian Health Service are decided by law, by Congress. Law and policy makes the rules for healthcare. And law and policy are the ones that make the rules and the care you're going to get, the care your grandma's going to get, the care your mom's going to get. That's what defines it. Law defines medical benefits for insurance companies, defines Medicaid and Medicare. These are all laws that define the kind of healthcare you're going to get. So I got interested in law because of that, to understand healthcare law so I could help make a difference in expanding more healthcare benefits. Some of you may have heard what's happened recently here in Phoenix. A couple of months ago, the Phoenix Indian Medical Center, one of the largest hospitals in the country, where I was delivering babies 20 years ago and was CEO, they closed the OB service. They're no longer delivering babies there at Phoenix Indian Medical Center. That was a tragedy. That was a severe tragedy for Indian women who go there to PIMC to deliver their babies. I've delivered hundreds of babies at PIMC, indigenous babies, from indigenous mothers who come from all over the country to have their babies there. And the reason they go there is because it's Indians taking care of Indians, indigenous health professionals, nurses and doctors, and what we do in understanding how we take care of our women in everything. And the thing that we do there at PIMC, when I was an obstetrician and delivered babies there in the 1990s, it was honoring and protecting the cultural responsibilities and the traditional birthing practices during ceremonies. Maybe your aunties or your grandmas or your mothers can tell you what goes behind a ceremony when a baby's delivered. I remember at PIMC, a lot of our women would after the baby was born, they would get the baby's first poop, what they call the meconium, and they would put it on their forehead to show the world that they had a baby. A baby was brought into this world, a sacred being. So that is what has been a priority to Indian Health Service and should continue to be a priority. But unfortunately, for some reason, this government doesn't understand that. For some reason, the leadership at Indian Health Service doesn't understand it. And this makes me sad because the executive leadership at Phoenix Indian Medical Center are indigenous people like you and me, but they don't understand. understand the importance of our cultural values and of our children being born. So we started a protest, a nonviolent protest at Phoenix Indian Medical Center there in the front, where we gathered yesterday, a group of us, to show our support for women and to advocate to Indian Health Service to open up labor and delivery so our women can have children there again, to open up the services at PIMC. Because you see, and maybe you have learned this already or will learn, the reason you and I have health care through Indian Health Service is because of the treaties. Treaties that were made over 250 years ago for the exchange of land that the new people, the colonists, wanted. The government promised that they would provide health care to our people. Those were by treaties. A lot of our people lost their lives, the bloodshed that was shed in order for us to have the rights we have as Indigenous people. As Indigenous people, we're the only people in this country that have a right to health care, that have a right to education. Why? Because of the sacrifice of our ancestors, your ancestors and my ancestors, who stood boldly before the white world and signed these treaties in order to not only to bring peace to this country, but to have the government promise us that they would protect our sovereignty, our sovereign rights. So those sovereign rights still exist today, but we have to fight for them. So that's kind of what we do right now. We're in front of Indian Health Service. And these sovereign rights that we have means it's going to protect our culture. Because remember what happened in the boarding school experience that I talked about. The boarding school was made to take away your ceremonies. The boarding school was meant to take away your culture. The boarding school was made to take away your language. The boarding school was made to take away your long hair so that you wouldn't look like an Indian, rather look like the white world. But we're not. We're Indigenous people. Indigenous people with a strong culture, with a strong resilience that we've had for centuries, even before Columbus first got on this side of the world. We took care of ourselves. We took care of our families. We took care of our elders. We had our medicine. We had our prayers. If it didn't work, we wouldn't have been here in the first place. We would have never been here. But because of our culture, we have survived. Because of the way of life, survived. And our language, the strongest essence of who we are. You know, the boarding schools made it an effort to take away our language and to teach us English here in the United States. In Mexico and South America, the Spaniards who invaded and colonized Central America and South America forced Spanish upon the indigenous people. So English is not really our first language. It's a colonizer's language. Spanish is not the first language in Mexico. There's hundreds of tribes with their indigenous language, the Yaquis, the Mayos, the Mayans, the Aztecs. And that language is important to us as culture, as who we are. That identifies who you are. And I'll talk a little bit more about language, but that's part of our intellectual property too. Now, the government, through the last couple hundred years, tried to take that away from us. And in some cases it did. There's a lot of our indigenous people right now, our indigenous youth, that don't speak our language, don't speak our. And why? Because they took it away from my parents and they never taught it to me. So for years I struggled, even as the world saw me to be a successful person. I went to college, I went to medical school, I went to law school, I had a clinic, I delivered babies, I was CEO, I did all these things that the white world would say, you know, Dr. Molina is very accomplished. And yeah, I was according to the white world. But yet inside I wasn't settled. I still struggled. And you know, it wasn't until later, my late 50s and 60s, that I went through some traumatic events that caused me a lot of embarrassment and harm. I was still drinking. Even at my later years, at 50 years old, still drinking, trying to find that soothing way to soothe my calm, my spirit. And I was convicted of a DUI. That made me hit rock bottom. At that age, still not settled in who I was. But that was the beginning of my recovery. A recovery that was going to take me on a whole new journey. And a lot of us have had those times of those you know, events that take us down, those events that finally cause us to think twice about who we are and do with our lives. And when I started this road of recovery, not only sobriety, but beginning to re-identify who I was as an Indigenous person, to begin to look back at me as an Indigenous person. Because, when I was young, in high school, especially a middle-class white high school, you don't want to be considered an Indian. Back then there was a lot of discrimination just by the way you looked or your color of your skin. People would discriminate against you. And that, I think, caused a lot of harm in young people like myself back then. But finally, after this, 10 years ago, I started to turn back to who I was. And I was very lucky at that time that I had a wonderful, um, experience that happened in my life. I met my current wife, Stephanie Ohitika Windbukro, who's Oglala Lakota from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation, from the little district of Wamani, actually a big district of Wamani. But her experience was different than mine. She was raised very traditional. She knew her language, her ceremonies, her culture. And when we got together and eventually married, she helped me find myself as an Indigenous man. She helped me find my identity as an Indigenous girl. She helped me understand my cultural role and responsibilities. And this journey just took off, because then I began to identify myself as an Indigenous man, as somebody who was not just a doctor for everything I did, but more importantly, an Indigenous man who was brought to this world with a purpose. And that purpose was to give back to my people. But now I felt more centered. I felt more of an identity of who I was. And that, for me, I think, has been the most important change in my life that has been since ongoing. And I share with my young listeners and people that, the things that will help you be strong through these times like the pandemic is coming back to your ceremonies, coming back to your language, coming back to the way of life that our people had, and for some of us, it might be difficult because maybe your parents and maybe your grandparents went to boarding schools and they've lost touch of that, kind of like my mom did, lost touch of the language and ceremonies. But it's never too late. It's never too late to come back, to learn your ceremonies, to connect to your people, to connect your language. Your language is the most important part because the language is what gives us that spiritual resilience. And the thing about it is that I think the reason why I was so unsettled all these years in my life was because that spiritual essence of being an Indigenous person is in your DNA. It's in your DNA. There's no way to refute it. Goes way back hundreds of years ago from your previous ancestors who carry that essence of who you are as a spiritual person, as an Indigenous person. That's why you'll have these feelings. That's why I had these feelings. And for some reason, it kept with me all these years because it was in my DNA until I finally come to acknowledge it. And we pray in our language because that's the language of our ancestors and our prayers that go up into the heavens. It's understood in who we are. So the strength of who we are. And our ancestors have never forgotten. They're always with us. They're always here. Now, I know Christianity has come into play in a lot of tribes and a lot of nations, and there was part of assimilation to teach us Catholicism and Protestantism and all these other religions that were brought in by the white people, the Western world. That wasn't our way of life. Now, I don't refute any of that, and I just leave it up to each individual to understand their way of life and the spiritual way of life. But always remember, we've always had a spiritual embedded in who we are as a DNA. Understanding that we're part of this world, creation, we have this energy that we connect to in this world, and an energy of a creator that we don't name as God or Jehovah. We just know of a creator of this energy that brought us all together and made us who we are. That's who we pray to. So then I think for me, in thinking about, how we come back to being able to deal with this pandemic, I think that I can just share some closing thoughts about this. First of all, I think for me, it's understanding who you are as an Indigenous person, to be proud of who you are. Again, like I said, when I grew up, it wasn't popular to be Native, Indigenous, but it is. It's something you can be proud of, your skin, the color of your skin, your look, your ancestors, your background, your family, your culture, your tribe, your ceremonies, your language. Very, very powerful things that will help you survive anytime. This is what kept our people alive all these centuries. Our people have experienced everything from epidemics to colonization to smallpox to all these diseases that our people have gone through, yet we continue to survive. We're still here. And it's that part of who we are, our DNA, our bloodline, that continues to keep us resistant. You know, when I talk to doctors and they say, well, what is it about indigenous medicine? You know, is it your ceremonies? Is it your plants that you use? Is it these ointments that you make or whatever you do? What I tell them is our medicine, our indigenous medicine is our culture. Our culture is our medicine. Everything that we do is ceremony. You know, my wife, Dr. Stephanie Bikro, Kala Lakota, we're just an example. You know, up in that part of the country in the Plains Hills, it's buffalo. That's their source of sustenance, of the buffalo hunts. But for them, they go into ceremony when they hunt buffalo. They go into ceremony for 4 days to pray, to prepare before the hunt. It's not game. It's not hunting for game like other people do it for sport. It's for sustenance. I respect and value the buffalo that's going to give its life to help people. Among the Yaqui community, the deer dancer, which is our sacred dancer, is brought into this world because the deer is sacred to us. The deer was our sustenance that gave people life. And in every culture, we understand the connection we have to the universe, the respect for plant life. Even some of the healers that I know who use plants for medicine pray for the plant before they take it because a plant is given its life. When we harvest plants, like wherever indigenous people live, we always try to protect it and make sure it grows again. So we're very mindful of things around us because we know we're connected, that without Unchimaka, this Mother Earth, we would never survive. You know, we have protocols for everything because we respect everything that we do. Somehow this white world doesn't understand that. You know, our Earth is being destroyed by mining and fracking, and climate change has happened because there's not that relationship with the world around us that should happen. But we have it, and you have it. So again, it's our and there's always that understanding that when we do go out harvest, there's protocols that go with it. We understand when to harvest and how to harvest, a time, a beginning, an end, the prayers that are given, the ceremonies that are done, because this is life, this is energy. And there's the 4 parts of the plant. How to use them.
Impacts the potency of the time of the year.
And the time when you pick it impacts the potency and different parts of the plants that you use. So all that is known by our healers, by our ancestors. So we want to take time to know that. So that's our medicine. Our culture is our medicine. So how do we take care of ourselves in this time of COVID? You know, the one thing that has happened, and it's not only, you know, things that you've experienced, but it's happening around the world. Something that's called COVID fatigue. People are getting tired. People are getting anxious. People are getting angry because now we have to live in this world where we have to wear masks, we have to social distance, we can't be with our relatives, and especially with school. Even with the course that I teach with college students, these are graduate college students who now have to go online. They're having difficulty because they're not used to this kind of teaching. We're used to face and being able to have these groups and students getting together for coffee or for lunch. It's different. And this kind of fatigue and this kind of hurt is taken care of, is also affecting even college students, graduate students. So what I do with them is we have a Zoom meeting every morning on Friday to just see how we're doing, to check in. And that's one thing we can do, check in with each other in the best way that you can, you know, be able to try to center yourself. And let me, I don't know if I can do this, but I'm gonna try this. I don't know if I can. Okay, can you see that slide right there? Can you see that slide? Okay, I'm gonna just close up with these three different slides so you can see them. First of all, on the left-hand side is our Yaqui deer dancer, the lasso. Again, a lot of our tribes have sacred dancers, and the Hopi, the Apache, the Yaqui. A sacred dancer that represents the spiritual world. It comes down the spiritual world to bless people. And that Yaqui deer dancer represents our sacred dancer, the deer dancer, who comes down in special times during the year to be part of festivals and ceremonies for healing. On the right-hand side, you see the gone dancers, the crown dancers of the Apache, the Yavapai-Apache. These are the mountain spirits that come from above, from the universe, to bring blessings to our people, to bring blessings to you. As you look back into your own tribe, into your own culture, you'll find that there's very sacred figures, sacred dancers that come to bless us and our people. Learn about them, because they are your protectors. They're the ones that are going to give you, when you pray, the spiritual and emotional power you need to continue to do what you're doing, to live the purpose that you were meant to live. We ourselves as indigenous people, unlike any other people in this world, your indigenous relatives in Central America and South America and Australia and Hawaii, all these indigenous places, we had the answer. The answer was we connected to the world around us. The world took care of us and we took care of the world. That's how we survived. And that's how you can survive. The next slide. I show this because this is something that I do every morning to help myself. That's prayer and meditation. For us, the morning is the most powerful time of the day. That's when the energies from the sun, from the universe come down and just flow over all the earth. This is a picture of the sun rising over the San Carlos Apache Reservation. Beautiful. I encourage every one of you that to take the practice in getting up early in the morning, wherever you're at. If you're in an apartment, you're in a house, wherever, get up in the morning right before sunrise and look towards the east and begin to see the glow of the heavens and pray and meditate. Because this is what's going to give you strength for the day. I know sometimes we get discouraged, we get frustrated, you don't want to get out of bed. But this world is waiting for you. The sunrise is waiting for you. The sunrise is there to give you strength and energy as you pray towards it. Even among our Hopi people, the young runners run towards the sun every morning to greet it. Greet the sun. Greet the morning rise. That's going to give you strength and power for the day. That's going to give you what the ancestors have always relied on. It's the morning sun. I put there on the bottom that our cultural values also help us to survive. Our cultural values of humility, kindness, charity, respect for others, and living in harmony with the earth. That's going to balance you. That's going to balance you as who you are and give you that sense of pride in wherever you're at. Whether you're in elementary school, high school, college, wherever you're at, your military service, wherever you decide to go, hold on to these values into your language. And again, in the evening after your day is over, you want to meditate. Do ceremony and prayer. It'll give you that strength that you need, that emotional strength to carry you through. If you're having a tough time in classes, that's something to pray for. Feeling lonely, pray for. We have relatives. You know that our tribes have always maintained this sense of connection, of being connected in spirit and in body. So reach out. We're not alone. We're all here to help each other. We always have been. So make sure and reach out to that. I want to and just to show you a couple of things here. Is first of all, these two things here that I'm going to share with you. This is called the eye of the deer, ojo de venado. And here's another one. This is what we wear as Yaqui people to help to protect us and to give us strength through the day. And this represents the eye of the deer that you just saw in that photo. So we carry that with us in order to keep us strong. Other tribes carry medallions or medicine pouches carry something with you that you can feel that's close to you to help you, give you that strength that you need to make it during the day. The other thing, here's an example of a medicine pouch from my wife's tribe. And this medicine pouch, and when I used to go to the office before COVID, I would wear this around my belt. And this was filled with sage. And this sage, again, is to help to protect you during the day. Again, these items aren't just novelty. They're just not things that we put together. They mean something. They meant something to your ancestors, my ancestors. It gave them power to be able to go through anything from a pandemic to an epidemic to anything to diseases. This was our strength here. Again, from my wife's tribe, the Lakota, here's a little turtle. And what happens here is that on this turtle, the umbilical cord of a female baby is put in here and held. And we wrap it in sage. So again, there's certain customs. And if you go back and ask your relative, ask your aunties and ask your grandmas about what they did, and maybe that'll help them come back to who they are too, because they remember these things and they want to teach it to you too.
Was the life that gave the baby to the mother. That's what they
And as an obstetrician, and as our people knew, it's the umbilical cord that gave life from the mother to the baby. So that's why we keep it here, as a way to be able to honor that and keep it with us. And it's going to guide the baby spirit throughout its own journey here. The other thing we do is eagle feathers. Almost every tribe that we know of, and even when we're up in Alaska with the Alaskan tribes, eagle feathers are important. The eagle is that relative of ours who flies high in the heavens that we respect. And through its feathers that we pray, and they're able to send our prayers up into the universe, up to our Creator, up to our ancestors. So if you have a feather, and maybe some of you have been given a feather through ceremony, but use a feather when you pray and hold it up. Pray towards the east, Make your prayers for everybody. You can even smudge yourself and be able to get that energy from the eagle feather. In some tribes, and maybe most of the tribes, we also pray in 4 directions. You pray towards the east, clockwise towards the south, clockwise towards the west, and clockwise towards the north. And then we can pray up into the heavens, another direction, down to Mother Earth, and then finally to ourselves. 7 directions with some people. These are very powerful ceremonies that are going to help you get through this. What I also do in the mornings is I burn sage. And maybe some of you have some of this, or maybe even Annalise can help maybe get some of these for our students. This is a shell, an abalone shell, and you can fill it with sage. And sage you can get at any store almost, indigenous store, or maybe in your tribal community. And you burn it, and you just get the smoke and put it on you to take away all the negative energy using sage. Other tribes use things like cedar. This is cedar. Cedar can also be used as a way to purify and bring good energy. So the sage can negate bad energy, and the cedar brings in good energy. So you can actually use these together to help you heal. Again, remember, you're just not a physical body. You're body, mind, and spirit. Our indigenous culture, our ceremony touches all those elements of who we are, mind, body, and spirit. That's what makes us healthy. In this Western world, all the media, social media, all the Twitters, they distract you from who you are as a human being, mind, body, and spirit. That's what we want to focus, and that's what our ceremonies helps to focus on. So those are just some of the words that I want to share with you, because you can and you will survive this. But the lessons that we're learning during this pandemic are also lessons in your journey. Do you ever wonder why you were born the year you were born? Some people say, gee, I wish I was born before the pandemic ever happened or could happen. Or maybe I wish I was born after this pandemic. No, you were born the year you were born for a reason. We're going through these things as Indigenous people for a reason. For you to find your purpose, to find your world, your role in this world. Because again, remember, you weren't an accident. You were not an accident coming into this world. You weren't an accident coming into the family you were born into the tribe you were born into the place you were born into. You were born in there for a specific reason. And when you begin to understand that reason, it's going to give you power and purpose and resiliency to go through anything. But my last closing words are, you were born for a purpose, and seek that purpose in your life, because that's what's going to give you the resiliency to continue in who you are. The last slide I'm going to show here is this. Yeah, that's Apache for thank you. Wopila, that's Lakota for thank you. Honeycomb, that's Yavapai for thank you. And Chokesia, that's Yaqui for thank you. Again, language is powerful. If you don't speak your native language, it's easy now to learn to speak it. You know, you can go on Google, you can go to your tribal website, learn how to say thank you in your language. Learn how to say hello in your language. Even though we don't have words for goodbye, learn how to say goodbye in your language. Even with that start, it's going to give you a powerful sense of who you are as an Indigenous person. And again, that photograph on the left-hand side at the bottom, that's my wife, Stephanie. I'm holding the rifle. And that's at a ceremonial buffalo hunt where our son transitioned to manhood. And the hunt of the buffalo, which takes 4 days. Days of ceremonies, you can see her elders there, dressed in ceremony. In the middle photo is us in our regalia. We take part in powwows when we can. Again, attend ceremonies when you can. Right now, it's difficult, very difficult to attend ceremonies because of COVID. But if you go to a Native Health website, we do a lot of online things now during COVID to help our people connect to Native events that take place around the world, around the state. And then the other thing now is that there on the right-hand side at the bottom is myself and our daughter, where we attended Sundance up in South Dakota. So my final words to you in closing is, in order to maintain that resiliency, that strength during this COVID, to continue to help us be strong and to be strong in school and to be accountable and to do the work that we need to do. Because again, you're in school for a reason. Your ancestors put you there so we could learn to give back to our people. Every morning, wake up to the morning sun and pray. Participate as much as you can in your ceremonies. Speak your language. And always find time at the end of the day to spend time in prayer and to meditate so you can find that inner strength that you have as an Indigenous person. So with that, I will close and give it back to our host. Kesia, thank you, everybody.
So anybody who would like to ask a question from Dr. Molina?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Do we have any questions? I have a question. Dr. Molina, this was wonderful and powerful. You told us not only about your own culture, but also other cultures. And I wanted to ask you, when you're in times of trouble and when you're experiencing hardship, what gives you strength? Like what in particular gives you strength?
Mm-hmm. Right. What gives me strength in times of hardship and in times of trouble? Well, the first thing I think about that comes to my mind is first of all to say that there's a reason. There's a reason this is happening. You know, even when I would speak to our medicine people, when somebody was sick with disease, they would tell the patient, there's a reason for it. There's a reason for the hardship. There's a reason for the difficulty. To everything, there's a reason in this world. The way our indigenous people look at it, there's a reason. So when you take that first step to understand that there's a reason for it, then it helps put things in perspective. It gives us then the sense of strength to say, okay, then let's go through it because I'm going to learn something. Because I know that I'm going to learn something from this. I'm going to take something from it as long as I do the next right thing. Not turn to alcohol, which is a way to relieve your anxiety. Not turn to drugs, which puts you in a different reality. No, there's a purpose and a reason for what we're going through. And we're going to learn something, a valuable lesson, so don't miss out on it. And then the other thing is, though, everything doesn't last forever. It'll pass. Everything eventually passes. So there's a reason for it, and it's going to pass. But the next thing I do is I usually burn sage. I usually get the sage. I burn a little bit of a sage. And what I do is then I do a prayer in the 4 directions. I pray for strength to get through what I need to do. And I pray for guidance to do the next right thing. Because I knew that the Creator put me in this purpose for a reason for what happened. And believe me, when you do that, you're not only going to get the strength to get through it, the understanding to know what it's all about, and how to do the next right thing, but you begin to grow as a person. You begin to grow spiritually. You begin to get emotionally and mentally strong. And that's what I do. Understand there's a purpose. Understand it's not going to last forever. And put yourself in prayer to understand and to learn about it. That's the way I take care of it. Other ways you can do it, you know, sometimes going outside. I know it's hard to go outside sometimes, but the natural world is out there. Creator gave us a natural world to connect to. When you go outside, you look at the beautiful mountains that lie over towards the east. You take a walk through the desert. You take a walk through the fields. Sometimes the thing that I also have known has been helpful, depending on where you're at, take off your shoes and step on Mother Earth. Step on the ground, step on the dirt, step on the ground. Let your physical feet make a connection to the earth, because there's an energy that takes place, an energy that's going to give you strength. You know, when we go into sweat lodge, we all go barefooted and we sit on the ground, we sit on the earth during sweat lodge. There's no carpet, there's nothing, just earth. Because our indigenous people understand that there's a connection between the earth and us as human beings. So take a walk, take your shoes off, feel the earth, feel the earth. That's a good way to just get out and connect with the world around you. So that's what I would recommend. Oh, and also just the last thing, again, the thing that's always helped me through my life is my connection to other people. If you have friends, you have a colleague, you have a counselor, you have a teacher, it always helps to talk to them, because Creator puts them in our lives too, so we can understand which way we need to go. So the people that work with you, the people that help you, they're there for a reason too. So that's the other thing I've always done, is reach out to other people.
So we have a student here who wants to ask you a question.
Sure.
Here, Mackenzie. Sure. There you go.
Hello, Mackenzie.
I can't think of a question right now, but I'll say what's on my mind. Um, what advice would you get if you become the first? Like the first in anything, Native Americans mainly? Because this whole entire time, there's a lot of us that we could be the first in, like the first president, the first person in court, the first and everything. So what advice would you get? Because becoming the first has like a lot of benefits. It's a lot of discrimination. There's a lot of hard times. There's a lot of people who are judging you, and some parts of it, people are like supporting you, but
That's
how
right.
do you give in the
Sure.
face of that?
Yeah. That's a very, very good question. There have been a lot of firsts among Native American people since the colonization period, because at one point in time, our people were looked at being primitive, uneducated. But throughout the last couple hundred of years, there's been a lot of firsts with our people, indigenous people. And you brought up a good point. When you become first in something and accomplishing something in your life, first of all, that's a real honor. That says a lot about you and your spirit and who you are. That says a lot about you and your purpose in this life. Because being that first, you're going to be a mentor to others. You're going to be an example to others to follow. And that's what we need. We need more first people of our indigenous people in every part of life to be the first. Because then after you comes another generation that, gee, I can do that too. I can do something like that too. In fact, I just read the news this morning that the congressman from New Mexico could potentially be appointed as the Secretary of Interior for the United States. She's a native woman from New Mexico, congresswoman. That's going to be a first. Secretary of Interior, a Native American woman, the president's cabinet. That's amazing, a first. And you've read through all other things in politics and in medicine, the first Native American to accomplish something. For me, that's an honor. For me, that's a blessing that the Creator has bestowed upon you. For there, that's a purpose that you should be proud of. But what I caution people is that, as my mentors tell me, take it as an honor and a blessing, and don't let it control you. Don't let it control your ego, because look at it as a blessing, as an honor to be used in the right way for your people. The other side of the coin is what you mentioned. What comes along with it? You see, our people of color, brown, black, red color, whatever you want to call it, have always and will always be discriminated against. You know, even when I was a doctor delivering babies at Banner Health in Mesa, some people used to think I was a housekeeper when I wore my sweats. I mean, my scrubs. And the nurse would have to explain to the patient, no, he's a real doctor. So the color of your skin or the way you speak or the way you look, unfortunately, will be a reality that we all have to face in this world. Discrimination, prejudice, and misassumptions about who we are. When I was in medical school, and a lot of natives who went to medical school back in the 1980s were the very first in their families to be a doctor. But yet in the medical school setting, they were looked upon as, well, we have to bring in so many minorities, so that's why you're here. You weren't given credit for your knowledge, for your skills, for your understanding. And in a way that can be hurtful, in a way that can make you angry. But that's when we come back to the beauty of who we are, to stand proud, to say, yes, I am a first, and I am indigenous. You see, because my story, if I would be able to change my history, but I wasn't able to, and I'm not supposed to, is I wish I would have learned that essence of being pride in who I am as an indigenous person, as a Yaqui, as a Yavapai, the color of my skin, the way I look, everything. Because I was trying to fit into a white world that I would never fit into. So when you're the first to achieve something, and I think you will, be proud of it, honor it, take it as a blessing from the ancestors. Don't abuse it. See yourself as a mentor for other young people, and be centered in your indigenous identity that's going to give you strength against all the onslaughts of discrimination or assumptions or prejudice. You're going to be able to stand up with your head high and say, yeah, this is who I am. You know, my wife told me something a while back that made me think about this. To put this in perspective, she said, for me, the world here recognized me as Dr. Molina, a physician and a lawyer and accomplished and everything else. And she said, you know, that should not define you first. What should define you is who you are. an indigenous man, then a physician. And that made a lot of sense. Because when you put your accomplishments before who you are, then that's when it starts to get a little bit shaky. Because then you depend on your accomplishments to give you that notoriety rather than who you are as an indigenous person. So now I kind of make it a effort to say I'm John Molina, I'm Pascua Yaqui San Carlos Apache first, because that's who I am. Secondly, yes, I'm a physician. I was the first Yaqui Indian in this country to be a doctor, the first Native American in this country to be a doctor and a lawyer. But I hold those as an honor, as a blessing that Creator gave me for a purpose. I don't abuse it, but I'm first an indigenous man and then everything else. That's how puts things in perspective. But definitely, that's just kind of my thoughts, but very, very good question. I hope I answered it. Thank you.
Okay, so okay. Sorry. So like
It's
when
good.
you're praying in the morning, what do you like pray for? Like, what do you say in your prayer?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good question. What do I say in my prayer? There's three things that I pray for. The first thing I pray for every morning is a blessing to be alive. I thank Creator for the blessing of life, good health, and I pray for the good health of my family and my relatives, that I'm thankful, for what I have. Thankfulness is always a good start for a blessing. Thank you, Creator, for what you've given me, for what I have. The next thing that I pray for is for those that I know need help, our relatives or friends who might be sick or be struggling. Then I pray for them. I pray that they would be healed and they would find wellness and they would be find hope in whatever they are. Because we know of those people. We know relatives and friends who are struggling, and then we pray for them. And then the next thing that I pray for is I pray for the direction in my life. I pray for what's the next steps in my life to make clear my journey, to help me solve problems, to help me do the right thing. That's what I pray for. As well as if there's anything specifically I'm dealing with, like either something at work or something that I need to work through, then I pray for guidance. I always pray for guidance in something that I'm trying to make a decision. You know, in your cases, it might be as simple as making a decision, what courses should I take next year? Or where should I go to school? Or who should I live with? You know, these are very important decisions that we have to make that guide our direction. So sometimes praying for that not only helps us, but gives us direction as where we need to go. So that's what I pray for. I'm thankful. I pray for relatives and I pray for myself for guidance and direction in everything that I do that will always be a benefit for my people. So that's kind of what I pray for. And then, of course, I then end my prayer in thankfulness and thanking the Creator for everything again. And then I close my prayer. So that's kind of how I approach it.
How do you find what you want to do?
Okay. How do you find what you want to do? Boy, that's a because some people in the very beginning of life, when you're young, you might have an idea already what you want to do. You know, I knew a lot of people when I was in high school that they knew that they wanted to become an engineer, they wanted to be a doctor, you know, they wanted to be a lawyer, they wanted to be a teacher. They kind of knew what they wanted to do, and that's good, that's okay. It gives you a start. And those kids that did that kind of thinking, at least half of them ended up doing what they wanted to do. Some wanted to go to the military. They just felt it. You feel it in you that that's what you want to do, based on what you feel, based on what you've experienced, and based on where the situation is with you now. So you make that step to go in that direction. About half of those people end up staying in that field. The other half end up changing later in life. Because what's going to happen is, I've always saying that about every 10 years of your life, your thinking and the way you look at the world will change. Your emotions will change. So it's not so it's not wrong to not know what you want to do right now, because sometime that lies in your future. And the way you do it is do it day by day. Do what is right at that time. If you're thinking about a career, then start going in that direction. Just take steps in that direction. I mean, it's not supposed to be that it might take you to another direction. But to not know what you really want to do yet, that's okay, you know. Or maybe sometimes, like for me, I knew early on in my 20s that I wanted to go back and help my people in some way. I didn't know how, but I knew I wanted to do it. So the first time around, I did it as a counselor, as a social worker, but then I got interested in medicine for a while. Then it got me interested in law. So wherever your journey takes, it's going to move around like this, depending on your experience and people that you work with, your experience that you go through, but let it go. Let it flow naturally. Don't feel that you're tied into something. At least that's my feeling. Go with where you need to go this time of your thinking. Then that's going to lead you to the next step. Like I say, some people know what they want to do and start in that direction. Just keep going. And if it's not supposed to be, then you'll learn and you can always change. You know, when I was in medical school, there were 3 people in my medical school class were teachers, were high school teachers. They taught high school for 10 years before they decided to go to medical school. Me, I went to law school when I was 50 years old. I changed directions because of circumstances and things that changed. Even in my law school class, there was a police officer, there was a fireman, there was a teacher that went back to school to go to law school. So my own feeling is we leave ourselves open to a journey that's going to move and change. Just pick a direction. That's what I tell people do. You just pick a direction. You're going to hit a fork in the road. Pick one. Even though you're not sure, just pick it. Go with it. Go with it. And at some point, you may change it later. But keep on that journey. Keep moving forward. Don't keep going to school. That's one thing I tell everybody. And as much as you can, keep going to school. You know, after high school, if you're not totally interested in college, take at least one college just to keep you busy, just to keep you thinking. Be involved with your family, be involved with your community. And what I've learned in my life is that it's the world around me that guides me where I need to go. I never knew when I was 17 that I was going to be a doctor. Never was in my mind ever. But it was things that I went through every step of the way that guided me. So just pick a road, pick a direction and go with it and see where it leads you. That's my advice.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Good question.
All right, come on now.
So like, have you ever met anyone who's like giving you advice and like, or like some kind of teaching that you hold on and you think about like look back at it and then like to move yourself forward or whatever?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Advice that's helped me move forward. And I think I go back to what I learned with one of the Yaqui healers that I worked with. And I mentioned it in my talk. With that, there's a purpose and a reason for everything that happens in my life. And that's helped me get through the toughest times, whether I'm sick or family members having an issue or I'm having problems at home. There's a purpose to it. There's a reason. That was one of the most important things that I've learned throughout my life. And to learn to look at that event, what's happening, in a way that'll help me grow. That'll help me keep moving forward, you know. And to learn that it's not going to last forever. You know, it's going to change, but it's there. It's there for a reason. Even illnesses. There was a Yaqui healer that told me one time that your sickness is trying to tell you something. It's trying to give you a message about how you live or what you're going to learn. And it's unfortunate that sometimes we learn through the most difficult times in our life. You know, when things are going well and everything's fine, then it's good. But when we hit those times that throws us off balance, or we hit those times that bump in the road, we have to step back a little bit and say to ourselves, what is this trying to tell me about me? In fact, that's the way the healers approach every time they talk to a patient. What does this mean to you? What is this happening mean to you? What is it telling you? That's been the greatest advice that I've ever had, because that way it doesn't make me a victim. Say, oh, poor me, this shouldn't be happening to me, because when you get that kind of attitude, it's going to keep you back. But when you think about it in terms of saying, well, this is trying to tell you something, think about it, talk to other people about it, and see what meaning you can make out of it. Because every life experience, every person you come across in that experience is a learning lesson, something to learn and to keep you moving forward. That's what with the last student that I talked to, sometimes those kind of experiences help to guide you where you want to go. If it wasn't for all the sick people that I saw in Guadalupe when I was a counselor, I would have never gone to medical school. But there was a reason why I saw those sick people. It was leading me to the next direction. So take a look at those things that happen to you in a good way, that it's meant to tell you something and it's meant for a reason. That's what's helped me a lot. Thank you. Good question.
Anybody else?